one of the most frequently talked about topics over the last couple of months, and we think for good reason in this case, due to the far-reaching effects and the reality of real investment taking place both with end customers as well as the technology providers that are going to enable all of this. So for today's agenda, we'll go through kind of the state of what we see in terms of adoption, how it's being used, and looking forward, what we think some of the size as well as changes in dynamics for adoption and usage will be. And then Alex and Catie will go through first the implications for the hyperscale vendors in terms of providing AI and leveraging it as part of their strategy and the investments required. And then Alex will look at, from the SaaS applications perspective, some of the ways that already it's being incorporated into their offerings and the role it'll play going forward. So to start, so this pie graph comes from an adoption study that we did back in late April, May timeframe, so already a couple months old. And even at that time, we found that 43% of the respondents who are cloud adopters within large enterprise organizations had already identified and had started using generative AI solutions within their organizations. And so we expect that number to continue rising, and we'll see. We're going to do another study coming up very shortly to get a test for just how quickly adoption has been growing. So going back to kind of the initial survey that we did in late April, May timeframe, we asked folks about whether they'd adopted GenAI solutions, whether they're evaluating them. And at that point, even we found 43% of the respondents in our study who are adopters of cloud technology solutions within the large enterprise segment were already finding use cases and leveraging it as part of their internal, even production environments. When we look at the types of use cases that early on they were starting with, administrative tasks, customer service, and software development, pretty evenly divided in terms of those broad categories. Now, the administrative task, I think, is an area that is especially useful for GenAI, for organizations to get started, where you can take a set of existing business data and look for things like anomaly detection, which seems to be hotspot early on for how organizations are actually using generative AI solutions. But the one that may have the most impact, both for the vendors that we cover in the technology segment as well as end customers, is around software development. So being able to, on the vendor side, the skill shortages around coding and the pace of innovation within the market for technology, the assistance of generative AI to make that occur more quickly, to not only bring that to market with customers, but within their own organizations, it's been especially useful. And then for end users, for the adopters of cloud technologies, access to skills, not ranks within the IT department, but also from partners and providers of professional services. There's just shortages across the board. And so where they're able to migrate to new environments more quickly, adopt new technologies more quickly, and really speed the process of what was formerly a more manual approach to putting in their software and IT strategy, leveraging the capabilities of generative AI. So we think there'll continue to be a lot of focus on software development. So with that, I'll hand it over to...
Thanks, Allan, and thank you, everyone, for joining. Hopefully you can hear me all okay, but please let me know if we can't. For this next part, we wanted to take a look at the hyperscalers and how they're specifically approaching GenAI. Just looking at the tech stack, obviously, there's more moving pieces to the stack than what you see here when we take into account the middleware and the APIs and so on. But we're really just trying to simplify and depict the core components that are enabling GenAI for customers. And of course, the foundation of all this is the compute, the infrastructure. And the goal here is really to offer the highest performance, most cost-effective infrastructure resources that can address the demands of model training and model inference. And so that compute, it's really table stakes. It's a given, but it's very important because that's going to impact the performance of the large language models and the applications on top of them. So what we're seeing is vendors leading with their own custom chips, which is of course nothing new in the market, but we're seeing that messaging align with GenAI and providing that greater performance and lowest cost per workload over the GPU. And at least in the case of AWS, that messaging is all about attracting developers that could, in theory, train these models quicker at a lower cost and therefore result in an increase in GenAI-powered services on AWS. And we don't necessarily see or expect a lot of migration activity. So in other words, customers aren't really migrating away from the industry standard hardware to these custom instances. But for customers already in the cloud, spinning up net new workloads, these offerings could be a really attractive and cost-effective option if they are running a lot of data-intensive workloads like AI. And so that ties into this theme of cost optimization that we've been hearing so much about from these vendors and from customers over the past few months. And so this really goes for AWS. Just when you look at what they offer, they are a leader in this field, but we're seeing other vendors follow suit. So Google Cloud is putting more and more emphasis on their TPUs. They launched their next generation of the technology at their next event in San Francisco last month. And a quick side note on that, TBR does have a piece coming out that covers Google Cloud's event. So we'll go into their compute announcements for GCP, but it covers a lot of GenAI content more broadly. So be on the lookout for that, or please reach out to us and we'll keep you in the loop. But of course, it's not just the proprietary chips, it's all the hyperscalers. They're expanding their investments in partnerships with NVIDIA as well to support these workloads. And another note on the infrastructure side too, just in terms of capacity to support these requirements, we're expecting a lot of investment from the hyperscalers. Just hearing some commentary on the earnings calls over the past few quarters, some are raising their CapEx guidance for the year, expecting so much demand to meet the requirements of GenAI. So I think it's a good indicator. Vendors aren't viewing GenAI necessarily as another tech fad. They're investing and they're preparing for this demand. So moving up to the next layer is actually the models themselves. So, we have OpenAI. There's companies like Cohere and Anthropic, which we classify as the foundation models, whereas Amazon Bedrock could be better classified as really the hosting service that enables access to those models via APIs. But for our purposes, we've just bucketed them together to show customers are taking advantage of these models. It could be text to image or whatever the use case may be. And they're integrated with the cloud services that customers are used to getting. AWS SageMaker and Google's Vertex AI are big examples. And so the fact that, GenAI is integrated with the services and that same user experience customers are used to getting is really important. And vendors are going to use that to their advantage. These models act as a foundation for them to build on. And that results from these developer apps that we're seeing, like Amazon Code Whisperer and others. So it's really about providing the complete end-to-end set of GenAI capabilities. And that approach is, of course, consistent with what we've been talking about in cloud for years. And that the hyperscalers have the unmatched infrastructure scale, and that enables them to build up the stack and monetize new applications. And that same approach is coming into effect with GenAI. Of course, there's nuance in what audiences these offerings are targeting, and then, of course, how they're priced and monetized. AWS's Code Whisperer is free for developers compared to Microsoft's for-fee service. So that's just one example. But the overarching approach is consistent with what we've been seeing. And again, customers are going to consider the infrastructure requirements and then also how integrated these GenAI services or capabilities are with their existing cloud estate. And so with all that in mind, I think next, a lot of getting GenAI into the hands of the customer and addressing this opportunity comes down to the ecosystem. We talk about the role of cloud ecosystems a lot here at TBR, and GenAI is really no different. Google and AWS in particular appear really focused on the breadth of models that they're supporting. So in the case of Google, with both the generic and the industry-specific models they provide, both internally and through partners, they support over 100 models. So it's a real commitment to breadth and supporting customers as best they can, including the ability to customize those models based on internal data. But it's not just the model providers, it's the ISVs that are coming in and building applications on top of the GenAI stack. And what that does is really enable more complete solutions at the end of the day, benefits the hyperscalers by driving up that infrastructure usage. And the last component coming in is the GSIs and the services providers. In Q2 23 alone, we saw several announcements from Google Cloud expanding their partnerships with maybe 7 or 8 of the main GSIs just around GenAI. So it really shows how serious they are about bringing their AI tools into the enterprise. So the role of the GSI, is identifying a specific industry use case, helping customers choose the right models, and also working with the hyperscalers to bring in those ISV partners that are developing with those same foundation models. So the race for GenAI, we think, is going to be all about aligning these 3 parties together to effectively identify a tangible use case and demonstrate that value. And just lastly, we go into more depth into the specific GenAI offerings like Google's Duet AI and Code Whisperer and so on, and some of those strategies in our TBR reports and our coverage. But hopefully this just provided a bit of a high-level view into what we're seeing with regards to the hyperscalers. And so now I'm going to hand it over to Alex to talk us through GenAI from the SaaS perspective.
Thanks, Catie, and hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Sorry for any technical difficulties earlier on the audio, and hopefully you can hear me clear now. I'm going to cut a little bit of what I was going to say before just to make sure there's time for Q&A at the end so we can get to all of your questions. So as we peel back the generative AI opportunity for cloud applications and the SaaS players, I think that it's really important to look at, what the strengths for the SaaS players are today. We look at a lot of these vendors like Salesforce, for instance, who's a company that I think has really been a front runner in terms of getting generative AI products out to market very quickly. This is a company that has reached a really high level of market incumbency and has really broad reach into enterprises across the globe. And that install base is going to be really valuable to these large language model vendors like OpenAI, Hugging Face, Cohere, and many of the others that are starting to pop up. And with that install base, these companies are going to be really valuable partners, and that's going to drive a lot of collaboration and cooperation between these large language vendors and the SaaS vendors to get these products and get these capabilities into the hands of enterprises as quickly as possible. Additionally, when we look at how generative AI value can really be released in the enterprise, these are workflow experts. When we talk about Salesforce, this is a company that has over many years, decades, built a leading position in the CRM space and has the expertise and the data in the CRM space to take the large language models that are being developed and really being developed in a really general sense, and being tuned to be able to have the broadest array of capabilities but not necessarily the specific capabilities that are going to be very valuable. So in my mind, Salesforce's role here really is being able to take these emerging models with high parameter counts and really specializing them into the workflow and embedding the capabilities seamlessly so that enterprises can take advantage of those capabilities day one. And, just to digress for a moment, there's a lot of talk around generative AI and looking at, how this market and how the performance of generative AI models is trending. And looking at different models like ChatGPT, these are models that are very consumer oriented. And when we think about the generative AI opportunity, we really need to think about how you go from the general to the niche, because that's really how this market, especially from a SaaS perspective, is going to play out. When you take it from a very general standpoint, you're asking a lot on the model, and the accuracy and the issues around hallucinations are going to be higher. As you start to tune models for workflows and reduce parameter count, the ability to have accurate information and have accurate outputs that are optimized for the specific use case gets easier. And that's really what's going to be at the front of these SaaS-specific solutions. And so I would say that when we look at the market as industry watchers, we really need to be looking at how the models are being specialized and not necessarily the headlines around ChatGPT. And so as we look at how these different vendors are specializing the models, keeping with the Salesforce example, this company has done a lot so far. Not only they're starting with their Einstein GPT offering, which really will serve as the foundation for a lot of the products that they're going to come out with and have already come out with. And this is similar to a Bedrock where you're able to bring in models. Salesforce does have models that they have through partnerships that they have access to. So like your OpenAI and Cohere and models like that. But also models that are privately developed. So Allan was talking about Walmart's model and Walmart's generative AI model that it's developed internally. So Salesforce has created the Einstein GPT brain, which allows you to access models or bring your own model. And that will serve as the engine that powers applications and tools like Sales GPT and Services GPT. Now, these tools are embedded directly into the company's existing CRM products, and they're going to be doing use cases like sales email generation, customer meeting summarization, really a lot of these specific sales and marketing use cases, and really tailoring these broad generative AI, these broad large language models around those very specific use cases. And so that's really kind of what a lot of these vendors are doing. And this is something that will be taking place across the SaaS market, including human resources and business application workflows as well. And when we look at how these SaaS leaders plan on monetizing these new capabilities, it really is kind of an indirect and direct approach. On the direct approach, obviously, you have the direct revenue uplift from charging customers access to these emerging tools. So in Salesforce or Sales GPT example, a $50 per seat per month user fee. The indirect approach really gets into sort of how an organization has to be strategic around their model governance and how they're developing their generative AI strategy. As Catie talked about recently, cost optimization has been an ongoing trend in the cloud market for some time, before generative AI certainly. And as we talk about enterprises adopting generative AI, this is going to be a costly endeavor. And it's not going to be a market where enterprises can develop multiple models and multiple, SaaS footprints around generative AI. And we really think that it's going to be a much more selective procurement process where enterprises are going to be picking and choosing where their generative AI, their large language models, reside. And they're still going to want all of their applications and their entire SaaS suite to be accessing these capabilities just based upon productivity gains that the technology really promises to deliver on. So TBR believes that generative AI could really be a major driver of vendor consolidation and really drive enterprises to look towards the vendors that they're doing the most work with and putting their generative AI technology and their large language models there, and then, procuring additional software applications close to those generative AI technologies. And this creates sort of a flywheel around how these software footprints for these enterprises really start to form over the years. And when we look at vendor consolidation as a whole, it's a trend that, I think has emerged over the past year and a half and has been showing up in our customer data. And I think it really predates generative AI and is something that, it would exist without generative AI. But generative AI will certainly serve as a catalyst. And many of the vendors will be looking to, really drive volume increases alongside their generative AI strategies and push vendors or push enterprises to procure more on their platforms. And they'll obviously use volume discounting and, pricing negotiation to really make that happen. And with that, I will open it up for Q&A. It looks like we have a few already in the queue. So coming from Krans, is privacy a concern in terms of generating demand for privately hosted large language models? Privacy is absolutely a top concern when we talk about generative AI, in especially, keeping confidential company data confidential. I believe that the SaaS vendors and a lot of public cloud providers, so you mentioned privately hosted large language models. I do think there's going to be demand for that. I think that when we talk about public cloud and SaaS vendors, there's a lot of product development going on towards solving this problem. Salesforce has their Einstein Trust Layer, which ensures that data that is being run through the large language models isn't being stored or isn't leaving Salesforce, and that Salesforce isn't using it basically for their own training purposes. I think long term, a big value prop of generative AI is the ability of these large language models to be trained on data and improve with time. So, I think we're going to have, customers wanting to have their models improve. And so in their own instances around the large language models and allowing those to improve and those to be trained on data, I think that ends up happening. But I think that there's going to be technology answers to running these in the public cloud. Obviously, we continue to see on-premise demand generally for these really sensitive data use cases. And so I think that there will be a market for it, but I tend to view it in terms of, there's going to be people that want it in the cloud just for the ease of deployment, and then some people that will want it more in a privately hosted instance.
I'll just add to that really quickly. I think it brings up the concept of security too, and how GenAI and security are working together. And actually, there can be real benefits of LLMs and large language models in the context of cloud security from threat detection and response processes. And we've actually already seen Google Cloud take steps to do that, and how they're integrating with their Mandiant portfolio with Duet AI. So It's actually using GenAI to summarize, what a hacker is trying to accomplish. And I think that gets to the heart of one of the things we hear from customers. They often tell us, they want their cloud service providers. They recognize that security is a shared responsibility model, but they want their hyperscaler partners to address more security aspects natively. So I think GenAI is a big opportunity for them to do that.